Hello my friends and welcome to my channel. My name is Mike. If this is your first time stopping by my channel, thank you very much. Please leave a like and subscribe down below. Leave some comments if you like what you see here today. If you just want to talk about swords in general, I'd be more than happy to. If you are returning to my channel, once again, thank you so much for coming by. I have a nice treat for you guys here to take a look at. Now, as you can see by the description below, this is the Chen Flying Phoenix Han Jian. And it comes in this really nice silk bag here, and it's poking out through the top here. So let's get it out of the bag and take a look at this beautiful recreation or replica of a Han Dynasty era Jian. Now, Han Dynasty refers to the time period at which this sword would have been produced and or used. And we're talking about the years 200 BC to 200 AD. So quite a long period of time. And throughout that time, the Jian went through quite an evolution and some changes, of course, as anything would throughout such a long period of time. And this sword represents something towards the latter end of that period. So sort of a culmination of evolution in the Jian sword design. Now let's get the blade out of the scabbard. We are going to take a look at the scabbard and the blade and the hilt and all of the fittings in closer detail. Just want to get some information out there before we get into the meat of this review. Now, Jian refers to the blade, I believe, the type of sword. And that is usually characterized by a double-edged straight blade, as opposed to the Chinese Dao, which comes a little bit later after the Jian, and that is usually a single-edged blade. So this is a double-edged straight blade with a flat diamond cross-section. And, well, it is quite a beautiful blade, and I can't wait to show you guys its features. Now, this sword costs around 400 USD. In fact, I think that's what it's advertised on LK Chen's website right now. Now, one thing to note, I bought my version about a year ago. Since then, prices have gone up. Mine was around $360. They're now costing around $400. So just know that supply chain issues, COVID changed a lot in terms of the economy and the world economy and logistics. So swords have gone up in price, and this has also. So this is 400 USD without shipping. If you want it shipped to the US, I think they are charging around $70, which also I think has gone up since I have bought the sword. So yeah, I don't know what to tell you about that. So that firmly puts this in the realm of a mid-range sword, not really a budget range sword. Now the blade steel is awesome. It is a forge welded or pattern welded blade out of 1060 carbon steel and T9 tool steel, I believe. And it does have an awesome, and we'll take a closer look at this in a minute, but you can see there it has a nice pattern in the blade. Like you can't really see it in this light, but we'll take a look in a second there. Has a nice folded pattern within the blade, and it is beautiful. So without further ado, let's take a look at this blade's components and features and get some close-ups of the awesome blade and the hilt portion, and then we'll go into some cut testing and the actual review, and I'll tell you guys if I think that this sword is worth your money. Okay, everyone, let's look at the sword piece by piece and section by section so that I can show you guys the different parts and details and features of this really nice Chinese Jian. Now, just be aware, I don't know the specific Chinese terms to refer to the different parts of a Jian, so bear with me. I'm going to be using essentially terms that would be used to refer to European swords. So let's start with the end piece or pommel area, or if you want to call it an end cap. So it's basically just a cylindrical casting, a disc type casting. So it's like a disc pommel. And it's really, really cool. It's cast brass, and as you can see, it does jut out here at the end so that you can lock your grip in here towards the end of the grip. And if we go over to the other side, you can see that the bottom of the end cap or pommel, whatever you want to call it, has some really cool Chinese decoration on it. Now, I'm pretty sure LK Chen does a lot of historical research with their designs and their swords, so this is probably a historic Chinese design. However, I don't know what exactly it is, so you guys may want to refer to someone else that has that knowledge. However, it is really attractive. Now, interesting note, earlier iterations of this sword had a flat, non-decorated end cap pommel piece here. So just to let you know, this is a little bit of a later version. If you have an earlier version, it's probably undecorated on the bottom. I prefer and like the decoration on the bottom, so I think it's really nice. And if you look closely, you can see some casting imperfections. There you go, and some casting, anomalies and whatnot, but that's to be expected for a sword in this price category. And this is a production sword, not a custom piece, so you're going to find imperfections like that in the casting pieces and fittings of the sword. However, I think it looks really cool. Now, moving up to the grip. So basically we have a cord wrapped grip. Now, it is very smooth, and actually the cord is not rough at all. It's very comfortable. I think it's probably like some type of silk cord or synthetic silk material. However, it's very, very tightly done. It's not loose at all. Up here at the top, if you try, you can kind of push this top strand up and down a little bit, but other than that, everything is wound very, very tight. Now, the grip shape is actually really interesting and unique. Now, it looks rather cylindrical and round, and you can see it has this tapering portion here, but if you turn the blade or sword over on its side, you can see that it does flatten out considerably, which really helps with indexing and getting your edge alignment correctly. Now, it slopes down here and tapers, and then it widens again and is very cylindrical towards the end. Now, the grip is actually quite comfortable. Now, as I understand, you're supposed to use this grip on this sword with one hand predominantly. However, you can use it with two, and there are, I guess, some techniques where two-handed strikes and grips are applicable to this design. However, it's mostly supposed to be used by one hand. If you do use two hands, what I did notice is that, as you can see, some of the cord here is bunched up a little bit because the end piece of the cord, when you're doing a cord wrap, gets tucked in over here and then pulled up through these strands and then sort of cut off over here. So it does kind of bunch up a little bit, and I did notice that there's a little bit of friction and rubbing down in this area here when you're using this sword with two hands. It's not really that bad, and it's not uncomfortable. However, I just wanted to let you guys know that that is a little bit of a hot spot, but it's really not that bad. But the grip is actually, very, very pleasing and comfortable to use. It's quite thin. I wouldn't say it's super thin, but it's nice and narrow. And if you're like me and you have small to medium size hands, it's very comfortable. And if you will notice, it does have sort of a diamond cross section that kind of matches the cross guard here up in this, from this portion on. You can see how it sort of slopes in both directions here, and that there's sort of like a central rib right here. So it's actually quite a complex grip, and well, it's very, very nice. So yeah, let's take a look at the cross guard. It's brass. It matches the brass coloring and brass material of the pommel, and it's a really elegant, small, nice, simple brass guard. Now, I don't think it's there to protect your hands from an opponent's weapon. I do think it's there to protect your hands from sliding up onto the blade when trying to do thrusts, and also to help with your indexing if you grip up here near this portion here. So the scabbard is actually a really nice feature of this sword. You can see it features these painted, once again, historical Chinese designs. I'm not familiar what this is supposed to represent or what it symbolizes. However, I think it looks really cool. It kind of looks like a wave pattern, but that's just me looking at it. I don't know if that's what it's supposed to represent. This sword is called the Flying Phoenix, so it may have some symbolism with fire and the phoenix, sort of rising from flames. So and now that I think of it with the red and yellow, it's probably more fire related than wave related. But anyway, I don't know that for certain. However, it's like black lacquered. It's very smooth. It runs all the way down to this sort of chape piece that is also made out of wood. It's very, very nice. There's very little imperfections that I can see. There's some scuffs here, but that's probably from me. And also, if you come up to where this central ridge is here, there's a little bit of bubbling and sort of lacquer deformation. I'm not sure what you want to call it. So it's a little rough there, but overall, I think it really looks nice. It looks like a handmade piece. It doesn't really look mass produced, even though this is a production sword, but it's quite nice actually, and it is quite slim and thin. So I really like the scabbard a lot. I love the scabbards on LK Chen swords. It has a belt loop here for some type of mounting system. Once again, I'm not sure how this is supposed to mount. I do believe actually it's just kind of your belt goes through here, your sash or something of that nature. But yeah, it's very, very secure with this cord here. There must be some sort of epoxy under there because it's very, very tight. Yes, so that's the scabbard. The one thing I will say that is a little bit of a downer is the scabbard. If you look down, it's really hard to see here, but it's very hard to see actually. This piece here is actually not on straight. In other words, when you turn, it's a little lopsided. So when you look down the scabbard, that piece does not actually. So I'm holding the swords. It's very hard to see. Just know that this piece here is actually not aligned correctly with the cross guard and the top of the scabbard here. It looks a little wonky, but it's really not that big of a deal. All right, so let's take the blade out and take a look at the really awesome portion of this sword. Okay, a couple things to note about the blade before I go on and start talking about it. Yours will be nicer than mine if you buy it from LK Chen. Mine has some scuff marks, some dings and whatnot. It also has been sharpened by me. So yours presumably will have a nicer polish and whatnot. Mine has been used at this point. So just know that when we get some close-ups of the blade. Now, the blade is really awesome, guys. So basically what we have is a diamond cross-section blade, a very thin and narrow blade that tapers gradually to a nice acute point. And you can see there the central midrib, which is actually quite pronounced. It's very straight and very, very nice. This blade is extremely attractive, guys. I frequently find myself just looking at it and the design features and just enjoying the sword in that aspect alone without even using it. But yeah, so as you can see, the sword has a pattern welded blade. So this is like what they call forge welded or pattern welding, and which brings out a beautiful folded pattern in the steel, and it is really a joy to look at, guys. I love it. You can see it right there. It's awesome. It runs all the way up throughout the blade, and it's quite beautiful to look at. Now, the sword does have quite a notable distal taper. You can get the measurements on the distal taper from the website. But you can see it's quite thick down at the bottom. I think it's a little bit more than 7 millimeters, and then it tapers all the way down to something like 2 millimeters or whatnot. So it has a lot of distal taper. The blade is extremely light, and it also has considerable profile taper. Now, one thing that I noticed about the sword when I first got it is that it has a portion of the profile taper right around here, where it juts in just slightly and then continues on profile. It continues on to swoop down into a finer point. Now, it's very difficult to see here, but if I can see if I can show you guys. At this point in the blade right here, there is a rather subtle but noticeable change in profile, and then it continues on gradually tapering. Now, as I understand it, that is, at first I thought it was a design flaw or a manufacturing flaw, but then I realized after doing some research that that actually is a historical design feature of the Jian. It's more of an earlier design. However, some later designs, I guess, incorporated that feature. So yeah, this blade is really cool. Now, mine, you can see, I don't know if you can see, it actually has a little bit of a secondary bevel. That's from me sharpening it. The sword came basically with a single bevel with like a very, very fine micro bevel. So, you know, mine has a slightly more secondary bevel, but that's because I sharpened the thing to get it a little bit sharper. So yeah, beautiful blade, guys. Well, let's talk about the manufacturer, LK Chen, for a minute, because his company is actually very cool. What he aims to do is recreate historic Chinese swords from different time periods heavily based on original surviving examples and a lot of historical research. And I think that's one of the coolest things about LK Chen, is that his swords don't really tend to try to create a modern interpretation of cultural historical Chinese swords. He's trying to get as close to the original as possible, even in some cases getting close down to a one-to-one replica of surviving examples. Now, as I understand it, he has a collection of original Chinese swords, as well as he went around to all kinds of different collections within China and different museums and did a lot of historical research in trying to put together swords that come as close to the originals as possible. And this sword here, the Flying Phoenix, is no exception to that rule. I believe that he based this blade on a real surviving example, which you can check out down on his website in the link below. But the blade is very closely replicating an existing Jian blade that survives in some collection. However, the hilt portion of that sword did not survive the passage of time, which is pretty common for swords as old as this. But the blade itself is heavily based or almost recreating as best as possible with modern materials the original design. And I think that's probably one of the biggest draws of LK Chen and his swords and what he's trying to do on the sword market. All right, guys, I got a branch that I freshly cut off of a pear tree. I had to do some pruning on it, and I'm not sure if you guys know, but pear, like most trees, the wood is considered a hardwood. And this is a pretty thick branch. It's pretty hard. Let's see what the Jian can do to this in terms of cutting ability and power. All right. Oh, all right. Looks like we had a cut and then it broke. Let's try it again. Different way. Woo! Oh my God. That right there, guys, is very, very impressive. Look at that cut. You can see it is curved, but look how far it got through this branch. That is actually really cool. Okay, we got a little bit of a thicker branch here. This one's actually a lot thicker and a lot heavier. So let's see what it does to this. Scalloped it a little bit. You can see there, it did take a nice little cut, and then you can see how it dips down. all the way through that one. Look at that, hanging on by a thread. It's actually quite impressive, guys, and considering how thin and how narrow this blade is, but it actually has quite a bit of cutting power. Okay, guys, if we just take a look at these branches on a little bit closer here, you can see that this was the smaller one here, and as you can see, it cut right through, and then you can see it kind of ripped over here. Here's another cut that I did. Once again, you can see quite clearly that the blade passed all the way through quite cleanly, and then I think it ended up tilting and ripping or breaking off here, but you know, you could see it made it pretty much all the way through. But the more impressive one, in my opinion, is this much thicker and heavier limb, and you can see here just how clean and nice that cut is. And had the branch not moved, you know, off of my cutting stand, it probably would have cut clean through, right through this, instead of actually breaking. But look at that. That is quite a substantial thick branch, and let me tell you something, this is fresh green wood, but it's fruit wood. It's very, very heavy. This is pear, off of a pear tree, and if you guys look up, pear wood is very hard. So actually quite impressive. Little waviness there. Nice. Okay, my friends, let's talk about the cutting capabilities and the handling characteristics of this Jian now that you've seen the test cutting footage. Now, I will say it is a fantastic cutter, and it's very surprising how well it cuts considering the dimensions and the size of this blade. So obviously it's a very long, narrow, and quite thin blade, and it is actually quite flexible, as you can see. It does have a lot of springiness to it. So if any of you guys are familiar with cutting with European swords that are thicker and heavier and have more mass, they're a little bit more forgiving in the cut than this sword is. So your edge alignment has to be quite good to perform really good cuts on targets like water bottles. Now, the water bottles I were using are actually quite thick, and they are difficult targets to cut. If you use those milk jugs or the paper milk jugs, that have that waxy texture to them, those are actually a lot easier to cut. The soda bottles, something like a Pepsi bottle or a Coke bottle, filled with water is actually quite a thick target. And a sword like this, if you don't have your edge alignment correct, it just won't pass through it. It'll knock it right off the stand, and you'll get some pretty ugly cuts on it. However, when your edge alignment is good with this, even with the factory edge, now I did sharpen this one, but even with the factory edge, it will glide through a water bottle, no problem. Now, I just mentioned that I did sharpen it. The sword did come quite sharp, actually, paper cutting sharp. It just, you know, I'm a little bit of a fanatic with my sharpening, so I gave it a slight hone with a 1,000 grit belt. And, you know, I did very, very, very little to it, and it's actually much, much sharper now, but it didn't take a lot of work to get this blade up to incredible sharpness because of the really nice edge geometry that this blade has. Now, handling, it's extremely light and nimble, guys. It's almost a weird sensation when you're using this sword and you're used to using heavier swords because of the lack of mass that's behind the blade, and just the relative nimbleness and point control that you have with this thing. Now, I am not a student or an expert in Chinese sword martial arts systems, and actually, as you guys know, I'm not an expert in any martial arts system. However, there are some good guys on YouTube that are doing some amazing work and producing videos that explain Chinese swordsmanship and how to actually use a sword like this, a Jian. Now, I'll put a link down below to one guy in particular whose channel I subscribe to that I really love, that has a lot of information on how to use Chinese swords and the history of Chinese swords. Make sure you check out his channel. I'm going to put a link down in the description below. Don't miss out, guys. His channel is awesome. So, now, as you guys know, I was using a lot of two-handed grips in my cuts, something that I would do with a European sword because that's simply what I know, and the sword performs very, very well. Like I said, it's extremely nimble and lively. Now, as far as I understand, this sword is primarily a thrusting blade. And from the Chinese techniques that I've seen, they primarily use it as a thruster. However, they also have cutting techniques with it, but the cuts are not supposed to be super powerful cuts that are supposed to hew through limbs and chop people in half or anything like that. That's not what this sword is about. This sword is about delivering quick, harassing cuts that can actually be, if you're very well trained, quite efficient and deadly, and quite devastating, actually, especially with the amount of speed that you can produce with this sword. So if you know how to use this sword correctly, its cutting capabilities are actually quite formidable. It's just not a power cutter. You guys have to understand that's not really what this sword is intended to do. It's more of a thrust-centric sword with the ability to deliver some nice effective cuts. Yeah, and like I said, it's just amazing to wield. It just has this amazing lively feel, and I can only imagine, if you are perfectly trained with this thing, how effective it can be as a weapon. The overall build quality and durability is actually quite good. I had some very bad cuts on those heavy water bottles, and it sent a lot of shock and a lot of resistance down through the blade and into the hilt portion. And there's no looseness. Everything is completely tight. There's no rattle. There's no blade deformation. Everything is perfectly straight. The blade sprung right back into place, after a really bad hit on a water bottle. If you guys have ever done a really bad cut on a water bottle, one of those heavier bottles, it feels absolutely terrible. And it really does put a lot of stress on the blade. And lesser quality swords I've actually bent on heavy water bottles like that, delivering a bad cut. So I can't really say anything bad about the durability and the quality build of this sword in terms of how solid it is. It's awesome. Do I think that this sword is worth your hard-earned money? And the answer is absolutely yes. If you are in the market for a Chinese sword, something that has a lot of historical research and is an accurate reproduction of a historic piece, one that is well made, one that you can take out into your yard and appreciate and learn about Chinese swordsmanship and learn about how something like this handles and have fun just cutting, it's an awesome sword, guys. I really do have to recommend it. LK Chen produces some amazing pieces And of course, I will put a link down in the description below as to where you can get this sword and the other offerings from LK Chen. But the handling characteristics are amazing. It is light, it is nimble, it is quick, it is well built. It will take you some time to learn how to get some proper edge alignment with this so that it can cut effectively, but I don't see it as a problem if you like to practice with this kind of stuff. And if you are interested in learning Chinese swordsmanship and the system that goes with this sword, I think this is a perfect tool for you guys to use when practicing that type of martial arts system. So the sword gets a resounding yes from me, guys. I really, really love it. The pattern welding steel, the workmanship, the attention to detail, and the historic research that goes into this piece, because this piece is based on real historical designs. And LK Chen does a lot of research, and that stuff does not come cheap. That takes a lot of work to get something like this correct, to make it feel like the historic weapon that it was intended to be. So great job, LK Chen, a fantastic sword. I hope you guys liked this review. If you did, please leave a like, please leave a comment down in the description below, and stay tuned for future reviews. I have some interesting stuff coming up. So I hope you guys have a really good week and a good day. Till then, stay safe and enjoy this hobby, guys, because it's fantastic. See ya.